With Spurs having a double in 29 as well as a fixture in blank game week 30, this is going to be a very Spurs-centric transfer tips video, but there's still going to be other teams and other players covered, so let's just jump straight into it. The first player up today in the buy section is Doherty, and I'll be honest, I was never really expecting to cover him in any of these videos because he was never really an option, but he's been nailed in the last few games. He has reclaimed that first right wing back spot over Emerson Royale, and his performances have been sensational in the last two, and his XG, his XA and his XGI stats are all at the very top amongst defenders, and he has only 10 appearances, very limited minutes, but in that time, 1 goal and 4 assists. His shots in the box, shots are pretty decent for the amount of appearances he has. So he's actually got more shots than appearances, which is very rare for a defender. An XG of over 2 and an XA of just under 2 with 4 big chances and 3 big chances created and 14 key passes. I think the main attraction here is the double in 29, as well as good long-term fixtures, as well as playing in Game Week 30, which obviously not everyone's going to do. Only 8 teams are going to be playing in that game week. So Doherty, there's a lot to like about him, and with Reece James, I'll be talking about him very soon. With him being potentially out for Game Weeks 28 and 29, I think Doherty is a very good pick, and you can replace him easily. There's also Cancelo, who's ill, and he might miss the Crystal Palace game as well. He missed the Champions League tie against Sporting Lisbon, so I think this could be one of the best purchases. If you're looking for a defender, he's only 4.7 million at the time of this recording, so I would thoroughly recommend him, and you just can't get much better than this. And looking at all the Spurs defenders, Doherty right now is the standout. A bit of a spoiler warning here. All of the buys in this week's video are Spurs players, and Kulusevski, a few of you have gone in early on the Swedish international, and fair play, he's been really good. I never really expected him to kind of be a facilitator and be able to cover Heung-min Son, but the fact that you can get Kulusevski and Harry Kane very easily as opposed to just Heung-min Son, I think that there's a lot to like about Kulusevski. His form has been really good, and as opposed to Bentancur, Kulusevski has just kick-started his Spurs career very quickly. 2 goals and 3 assists in 6 games. Yeah, most of his goals and assists are coming against weak opposition like Everton and Leeds, but he's still getting those goals and assists, as opposed to Lucas Moura, who doesn't really do that on a consistent basis. Kulusevski's been putting in some very good performances on top of these stats that you can see on screen. An XG of just over 1, an XA of just over 2, 1 big chance and 4 big chances created. His creativity is very good for that Spurs team. They were severely lacking that, and he's been a very good signing so far, and very similar to Doherty and the other players we're going to talk about later. The fixtures are good long term. The double in 29 is not too bad. I would argue it's a better double than Liverpool's, but obviously Spurs are a much worse team than Liverpool. But I think Kulusevski is probably one of the best midfielders you can get, and if you're kind of looking for that midfielder around 6.5 million or under, I think you shouldn't look any further than Kulusevski. For weeks I've been talking about Harry Kane and Heung-min Son being buys, and I don't really change my mind too much about it, although I'll talk about Son later on. Now with Harry Kane, if you're looking for a Spurs player right now, you don't have any of them. Harry Kane has to be the first one on your transfers list because his form has been absolutely sensational, especially under Conte, and in recent weeks he's been getting double-digit return after double-digit return, and that was kind of absent for the majority of the first half of the season. His XG is sensational, over 13, his XA is over 7, 21 big chances and 11 big chances created. His stats were decent even when he was really poor and couldn't get those goals and assists, so his conversion rate and his end product just wasn't there. But now he's got the underlying stats, he's got the performances and the goal output, so there's a lot to like. And the reason why I really back Harry Kane right now is because we don't have any options up front, pretty much no one, and Harry Kane is the only reliable striker right now, so you can invest a lot of money in there and then in a Mohamed Salah midfield and then spread the funds across the rest of your squad. But I would try to have 1 premium striker in Harry Kane and 1 premium in Mohamed Salah. The kind of downside to that is that you've got more options in midfield, so you can go to Bruno, Heung-min Son when fixtures term, and also you can bounce between different premiums. With the strikers, if Harry Kane starts dipping or if he gets injured, you can't really find another like-for-like replacement. But then the pro to that, and having such a expensive striker, is you can pretty much move to any other striker in the entire game, and I think Harry Kane is worth the money, even though recently, or should I say maybe a month or two ago, I would have said, no, you know what, he's not worth the money. Heung-min Son offers better value, go for him. But right now, in terms of team structure, you have to think a lot about that. Harry Kane just fits the bill, and I think he's a buy. Heung-min Son is still a valuable buy, but I think if you don't have any Spurs players right now, then I would rather go for Kulusevski and Harry Kane. It's just cost effective and you get the most value that way to attack this double in 29 as well as really push forward beyond the rest of the season. Now, Heung-min Son, if you have him, in most cases, I would try to hold him, but I can see why a lot of you, and I'm even considering doing the same thing, you can get rid of Son and Jimenez for Kulusevski and Kane. Now, that's not because Kane is suddenly the best option in the game and Son is worthless. That's nothing like that. I think it's still quite similar, and in terms of value, Son still offers, in my opinion, the better value for money. But in terms of team structure, you have so many midfielders to choose from. You can't say the same about the forwards. Then you factor in the ability to get Harry Kane and Kulusevski as opposed to just Heung-min Son. That's also another big plus in the favour of Harry Kane. And also, if you look at their form, yeah, Heung-min Son is still getting a lot of goals and assists, so he's still a really good option. But his performances have been pretty lackluster. His finishing has been pretty poor by his standards. Harry Kane, though, has been clinical. He's got the underlying numbers which are better than Heung-min Son. And I just think he's a better option right now. But in terms of value until the end of the season, I still think Son offers better value. And 11 goals and 7 assists, still better than Kane. 55 shots, 35 in the box. XG and XA figures are pretty healthy. 17 big chances and 7 big chances created. I still think Son is the second most reliable midfielder in the game, especially with Bowen out for a few games at least. So Heung-min Son is still worth holding, but I can understand why some of you would sell him. So it ultimately depends on your situation. But if you can help it, try to hold on to Son because I don't see a huge difference between him and Harry Kane. Some would argue that's not the case and that Harry Kane is just a much better option now. But once Son gets into that form, because he's already scoring and assisting anyway, then I think he can produce some really big returns. And in terms of points and double-digit returns since the beginning of last season, Heung-min Son is actually better than Harry Kane and he costs almost 2 million less. So that's why I really like Heung-min Son. But with Harry Kane's form, which is very hard to ignore, if you have no other way to get to Kulusevski and Harry Kane, then maybe Son is worth selling, but try not to do so if possible. The second hold of this video is Ryan Fraser. Now, this is obviously going to be prior to any press conferences by Eddie Howe, but recently he has said that he should be fine for the second game in Gameweek 28. Therefore, he should be fine for the double in 29. And Fraser was the big hitter at the beginning of Gameweek 28 as opposed to Joe Willock, and he's been really good recently. So Ryan Fraser is worth consideration. I wouldn't buy him in right now, but if you have him, I would hold him, and I still think he could do well in that double despite facing Chelsea and Everton away. And 2 goals and 5 assists, 20 shots, 13 in the box. His XG and XA aren't great, but most of the kind of upturn in form has come recently. So Ryan Fraser is worth holding. That's pretty much it regarding him. And in terms of Newcastle assets, I wouldn't bring them in right now. But if you have a Ryan Fraser, a Joe Willock, etc., in most cases, I would encourage you to keep. However, if this is your only route to Kulusevski and, for example, the rest of your midfielders are playing in Gameweek 30 and you don't want a free hit, in that case, I would sell Fraser to Kulusevski. I think it's worth it. Otherwise, I think it's worth holding. Coutinho showed his class in Gameweek 28. I was so close to getting him and a Chelsea defender. Unfortunately, it didn't happen for me, but I was always recommending Coutinho. And even in the first week after he produced that really big return on his debut, I was talking about getting him in, even though it seemed a bit premature. And right now, I would still hold him, but what I would suggest is that in the long term, he might be a sell. So we're talking about around Gameweek 31 when the fixtures turn for Aston Villa. You could even argue right now the fixtures are already bad, but because he plays in blank Gameweek 30 and he's got an okay fixture right now because West Ham have seemed a bit shaky in Gameweek 29, I would hold on to Coutinho. He's probably one of the better midfielders in Gameweek 30, but other than that, when we're looking beyond Gameweek 31, I would probably look to sell him and talk about this in my transfer tips videos. His stats are pretty good though. 3 goals and 3 assists in only 7 appearances, an XG and XA of over 2, and 3 big chances and 4 big chances created. So decent stats. He's been really good, especially in certain games. He was a bit kind of underwhelming just before Gameweek 28. He was playing in a deeper role, but that suddenly changed. And I think that in the second game of Gameweek 28 against Leeds, he could go crazy yet again, and he could therefore become the best captaincy option for the week. And I was always looking to bring him in. Unfortunately, I didn't do so, but it doesn't matter. I think if you have him, obviously enjoy the points, and I would keep him just a little while longer, probably until Gameweek 31. This may seem a bit strange because I was talking about holding Coutinho, but not the same with Digne, and Aston Villa have just kept 2 clean sheets back to back, but I still don't trust the villains defensively. And Digne, maybe this is a bit of a personal thing, he seems like such a troll. control. I've talked about this in my team selection video. He seems to always dodge points when he's in my team. And unfortunately, when Aston Villa won 4-0 in Game Week 28, Digne misses out. His stats are decent though, especially under Steven Gerrard. But over the course of the season, nowhere near the high levels of productivity and underlying stats that he usually has. But that's also in large part due to how Rafa Benitez set up his team with Everton. He has been better at Aston Villa, but at the same time, I still think it's worth selling him. You can go to Doherty, for example, or maybe a few other players in defence that have a double in 29 or that play in 30 and are good long-term options. And I would have said Digne to Reece James was a really good move, but as we'll talk about very soon, Reece James unfortunately is injured. But Luca Digne for me, despite the promise he shows and the fixture in Game Week 30, I would probably sell him. If it wasn't for Reece James getting injured, I would have said just keep him because he could do really well against Newcastle. But because he's going to miss the second game in Game Week 28 against Norwich, and there is a possibility he will miss out against Newcastle, I think it's worth selling him to a Spurs defender like Doherty and someone who plays in Game Week 30, and you can bring him back in Game Week 31. So this isn't a long-term sell. You're going to bring him back eventually around Game Week 31 or whenever he's available. But right now, I will look to sell Reece James. It's very unfortunate because he's got 5 goals and 6 assists, which is incredible in just 17 appearances. His XG and XA, I mean, all the stats are very good. 3 big chances, 6 big chances created, 32 key passes. The shot volume is okay, 13 shots inside the box. Reece James has been really good this season, and Chelsea are going to miss him whenever he misses out, even if it's against Norwich or a team that Chelsea are expected to beat. Reece James is such a pivotal part of that Chelsea team, so it is unfortunate. But those of you who got Reece James already and enjoyed his haul against Burnley, fair play, and some of you captained him as well. Still a really good choice. Obviously, I can understand your frustration because he could have been on for a really big haul in Game Week 28, but enjoy the points. And if he's available ahead of Newcastle, then I would reconsider and possibly hold on to him. But in most cases, I think I would sell Reece James, and you can always bring him back eventually. Jimenez. It's been quite a crazy ride. I was talking about selling him around Game Week 25, 24, even ahead of Game Week 26. I was talking about skipping him, but then the news broke out of the double in 26, 28, not blanking in 27, 29 or 30, so I thought Jimenez was therefore a good option, but in recent weeks he's been benched. Let's see if that changes against Watford later on, but it's still really frustrating, and Jimenez hasn't been that good this season. I've always said this, and it's not like I suddenly thought he was a good option, but the fact that he isn't nailed on now really frustrates everyone that has him, and his stats have just been pretty poor by his standards. His XG and XA are okay, 10 big chances is not bad, but 5 goals and 4 assists in 25 appearances. Yes, he's only around 7 million, but it's still really poor, especially when you compare it to the other midfielders around a similar price like Jarrod Bowen. So for me, Jimenez is a sell, and yes, he's playing in Game Week 30, so there is an argument to hold on to him, but a lot will depend on what happens in the Watford game. If Jimenez plays and he shows some good signs, then it might be worth keeping him, and you can sell someone who blanks in Game Week 30 to a Harry Kane or someone else. But otherwise, if that's not the case, right now, as things stand, for me, Jimenez is a sell. Emmanuel Dennis was one of the best strikers at the beginning of this season, but he is now the first skip of this video, and he just had his double in 28. Southampton's not a bad fixture, and around Game Week 32 and 33, they're pretty good, but he's blanking in Game Week 30, he faces Liverpool in Game Week 31, and his form has been abysmal. Yes, he produced a return, I think it was against Crystal Palace in Game Week 26, but his finishing has been erratic. He missed an open goal against Arsenal. Yes, he did score in the opening of the game, but it was disallowed. His stats have actually improved. His XG is now over 7. And for a budget striker like him, they're pretty decent stats. They're quite similar to Jimenez, and in some cases even better. More shots, better XG, better XA, similar big chances, just 1 fewer. But I would still skip Dennis, and if you have him, I'd probably sell. And there's not many strikers to choose from, so who do you really go to? I'd still say Broja, I'd say Adams, Harry Kane, and a few others. There's not much to choose from right now. Danny Ings could be someone worth considering, or Ollie Watkins, but we don't have much at our disposal. Yet I would still sell Dennis, and you could always downgrade him to a Broja and invest that money into the rest of your squad. I've never been too keen on Matip. He's always injury prone and he does rotate with Konate. So for me, Matip is a skip. I wouldn't have him on a wild card. I wouldn't have him on a free hit or anything, in my opinion. Let me know what you think of any of these choices, by the way. Do you disagree with any of them? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. But for me, Matip, he's a good player and when he's fit, obviously he's one of the best centre-backs in the league, but I wouldn't go for him. If you want to double up on Liverpool defence, go for Trent and Robertson. It's very expensive, but it's worth the money, and around his price you can go for a Spurs defender who has a double in 29 just like Liverpool, but also playing Gameweek 30 and good long-term fixtures. And even Liverpool's next 5, the fixtures aren't that great. The double in 29 isn't the greatest. He blanks in 30, faces Watford, which is very good, but then Man City away. Villa away isn't too bad, but that's not really great. So for me, Matip is a skip. If you have him, and I know it's a bit of a difficult one because he has a double this week, if you can go from him to Robertson or Doherty, I think it's actually worth it. He might not even play both games in Gameweek 29, and his stats aren't bad. He is a centre-back after all, and he hasn't played all the minutes. He's been taken off early at times, and he has a good number of shots inside the box, and overall, pretty much all of his shots are inside the box, which makes sense as he's a centre-back. And his XG and XA just over 1, and also 2 big chances, 1 big chance created. Not too bad, but ultimately, I would just skip him. The final player on this list, and it's another Spurs player, is Ben Davies. The reason why I've said this is because you can go to Matt Doherty for just a little bit more money, and he offers so much attacking threat. Davies is more nailed, that's what I would say, but I would still chase the upside, and Doherty with his current form should be starting both games in Gameweek 29. And Davies, his XA is still not 1, which is pretty poor. His XG is under 2, 6 shots inside the box, 11 shots overall, 2 assists with no goals, 3 big chances, which is pretty decent, 0 big chances created. He can play as a left centre-back or as the left wing-back, it doesn't really matter, but he tends to play as one of the centre-backs. And for me, Ben Davies, he's just not worth going for. And why go for him when you can go for Doherty, who's been producing some insane numbers, some really big hauls, and he's the informed player right now. But let me know if you would go for Ben Davies. I think a similar thing would apply to Eric Dyer and the other Spurs centre-backs, and maybe even Reguilon and Emerson Royal. I would just go for Doherty if you go for a Spurs defender, but maybe that is narrow-minded. The wing-backs tend to be really good for Spurs. If Sessegnon is out, Reguilon is now once again a decent option, and if you have him, I would hold on to him. But in my opinion, if you don't have any Spurs defender and you're looking for a way in, go for Doherty and don't go for Ben Davies. That's it. We've covered 12 players today. There's also many others like Joao Cancelo. What do we do with him? A lot of that will depend on the team news and anything we get in the next few days before the deadline. But as things stand, Cancelo could miss out. And either way, I'd probably look to sell him on to a Robertson, a Doherty, or any of these defenders we've discussed today. But thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. It really means a lot and it helps out the channel, so consider doing so. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM. The Discord server and the league is all in the description below, so check that out. And you can also become a channel member as well as a Patreon. And if you sign up right now to any membership tier, you can get exclusive early access to all my videos. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of Gameweek 28. Good luck. And the same goes for 29. It should be very interesting. Take care. Enjoy the football. And I'll see you next time.